video is sponsored by Hey Polo. Keep watching to find out how they can help your family to stay safe and connected. Taking our twin baby girls to Malaysia for the first time was emotional. Not just because it was the first time they met that side of the family, but because we were arriving as a very visible, very queer family into a country where queerness is understood very differently. Whilst in Malaysia, I found myself asking questions that I hadn't expected. Like, how do you balance being authentically yourself with respecting a culture that isn't your own? What does family mean when it stretches across countries, languages, and belief systems? And what happens when the people who love you live in a country that doesn't fully recognize your life? This video is not about judging Malaysia, and it's not about positioning the UK as somehow better. Believe me, we still have a way to go for equality for the L's, the G's, the B's, the T's, and the pluses. It's about something much more interesting than that. It's about what happens when your normal, boring little queer family life meets different cultural framework. Because that experience taught me a lot. As everyone who's travelled knows, it's not always possible to stick together with your partner, going through airport security, finding which terminal you're supposed to be at, or navigating new places together. I mean, don't judge, but I still get lost in the supermarket sometimes. It's easy to get split up and lose who you're with, especially when you're each pushing one twin in a buggy and the lift doesn't have space for you both, but oh no, what? Where's she gone now? And for someone like myself that finds busy places difficult to navigate at the best of times, losing your family in an airport is not fun. Neither is it fun to lose them in a huge Malaysian shopping mall, or at a night market, or even by the pool. I swear she said she'd be right next to the tall palm tree. Wait, are they all tall palm trees? And that's why we use Hey Polo, the sponsor of today's video, developed by the team behind channel favourite Surfshark VPN. Hey Polo is a privacy-first location sharing app designed to reduce worry, not create pressure. It kept our family connected without constant tracking, surveillance, or control. It's about knowing someone's okay, not tracking their every step, or allowing their information to be sold. It's okay, Mummy is coming with the bottle. She's just moving really slowly. For some reason. It also means our family and friends around the world and back home, whether it's Claudia's family in Malaysia or Clara in Spain, can also have peace of mind, as creating groups and adding family, friends, and whoever you want is unlimited. But unlike other apps out there, Hey Polo never sells, shares, or monetizes location data. No ads. No data brokers, no hidden trade-offs. The person sharing their location is always in control of what they share, with whom and for how long. There's no silent tracking or power imbalance. This is just a family tool to help you all stay together. We use location sharing a lot at home too. It's an almost vital part of our parenting to be able to say, it's okay, Mummy is just turning into our road now. Think peace of mind without privacy invasion from any side. And inevitably, when my phone battery dies again because I've forgotten to charge it, no one panic. Hey Polo tells you when someone's phone is low battery, so my silence doesn't mean I'm in trouble. I just need a better charger. And look, I don't want to track my wife. I just want to know how much quiet time I've got left at home to film this video until she returns with our gorgeous but overexcited children because they haven't slept at all on the car journey home. Protect your loved ones without spying on them. Get Hey Polo with 40% off your first year with code Jessica. Just go to heypolo.com/Jessica. Link in the description. Our family and Malaysia. This trip was my 5th visit to see my in-laws in Malaysia. They weren't actually my in-laws yet, the first time, but we're still counting it. It was our 4-year-old son's 3rd trip there and our twin baby girl's first ever trip abroad. How did we cope with 2 10-month-olds on a plane for 13 hours? Thank you for asking. Watch my last video for more info on that. For Rupert, it felt like an almost triumphant return home, as he's been desperate to return for the last 2 years. For us, it began with utter panic about whether we had enough parenting skills to even survive the journey. And for the girls, it was a big moment of meeting family, experiencing their culture and history in a way that, sure, they probably aren't going to have crystal clear memories of their 10-month-olds, but they're building a familiarity with smells and tastes and faces that is going to mean something to them in the future. Hello to all you new people. If you've got this far and you haven't realised, I don't have a husband. I have a wife. We're a 2-mum family with 3 children. I am, as my son recently informed me, the white mum. This is the most tanned I've ever been, so he has a point. I make fun, uplifting and educational videos about pop culture and history through a queer, disabled and feminist lens. So if you like this video, please feel free to subscribe. So we were arriving together into a country with its own cultural expectations around family, gender and relationships. Malaysia is a complex, multicultural country with diverse communities, religions and traditions. And like many places, it has different cultural and legal attitudes towards LGBTQ+ identities than the UK. Is the nicest way to say that. Don't worry, we'll get into it. The majority of the population, at 69.4%, are Malay or Indigenous, 23.2% are Chinese, and 6.7% are Indian. That leaves a tiny 0.something% that are other. Islam is the largest and state religion of Malaysia, although it is a multi-religious society and that is constitutional. Just under a fifth of the country are Buddhist, as most Malaysian Chinese identify as Buddhist, but some are also Taoist or Christian. My in-laws are Chinese, as you've probably guessed from the number of Lunar New Year related things that we do. Also my children have Chinese names as well, so. Definitely the country feels broadly default Muslim unless you're in the kind of specific Chinese areas or visiting a shop or restaurant that is more catered towards other ethnicities. Obviously we visit more of the Chinese geared shops or restaurants because we're going to eat Chinese food. As you can tell, I'm quite clearly a tourist when I'm there and I look very different to everyone else. But I'm more aware of modest dressing, for instance, and just being respectful than I would be if I was on holiday at the English seaside or a European resort. Although obviously quite a lot of our holiday is hanging out in the suburbs with various cousins, so that does make a difference. The last 2 times we were there, we had only Rupert with us, and the first time he was only 18 months old and he wasn't the most chatty to strangers. He was also bafflingly blonde, which he isn't anymore. Take everything they teach you in school about recessive genes with a pinch of salt, okay? The blonde will break through. So when someone asked, who is the mother, whoever was closest to him would just say, I am, don't worry. And we thought we'd do the same thing this time. We just had our first experience of who is the mother? Oh, it's the one holding the baby. Not working. So I was in a baby clothes shop. Just me, Theodora, one mother, one baby. And the shop assistant comes over. Nice older Muslim lady. Looks in the buggy and goes, oh, so cute. Thank you, thank you. Looks Chinese. You the mother? I'm like, yes. Because I am, yes. Has the father's nose. Good. Nice small nose. I shouldn't have said anything. Instantly regretting I gave you license to stare at my huge nose. Please stop. Good thing didn't get the mother's nose. No one look at my nose now. I'm really hammering this point in now, lady. And Claudia walks in with Augusta, an identical baby to this one that she's looking at. So the lady looks at my baby, that identical baby, and then up to this lady that also has a really small nose. And I can see in her mind the calculations. And she says, who is the mother of this baby? And Claudia, unaware of the situation, just says, I am. And the lady processes, good. Has father's nose. Nice small nose. I have not won the nose wars today. Malaysia's where I go to feel like I'm too tall, too lanky and too overburdened with nose. But generally, rather than thinking in terms of are people accepting or not accepting, it's probably much more accurate just to think in terms of different frameworks for what family and relationships and identity look like. Family across cultures. One of the first things you notice when you travel is that family doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. In the UK, family is often quite nuclear. It's parents and children living independently. I mean, I can count on one hand the number of British parent friends who have involved grandparents, whether that's physically or financially or even emotionally. I mean, I feel sadly, just the way our society is structured, this emphasis on privacy, independence and personal space. But in Malaysia, as in many other parts of the world, family structures are often more extended and interconnected. You're not just part of a small household, you're part of a network and you're representing them all. Grandparents, aunties, uncles and cousins all play active roles in daily life. People live with their parents until they're going to get married. Researchers have been studying these differences for decades, and one of the most widely cited frameworks comes from Gert Hofstede who studied how cultures differ in the way they organise social life. One of his key ideas is the distinction between individualist cultures and collectivist cultures. In individualist cultures, like the UK, people are encouraged to think of themselves as independent individuals, identities tied to your personal goals and personal achievements and personal freedom, whereas in collectivist cultures, which includes many parts of Asia, and please no one have a hissy fit about communism, identity is more closely connected to the group. I'm part of this family, I'm part of this community, we have a shared responsibility. That can show up in very practical ways: who looks after the children, who makes decisions, who you turn to for support. And one of the things that really struck me during the trip was just how lovely that is. My children are part of this community, this clan. They're held, also literally, by many people. And me being not Chinese or not a husband doesn't change that fact. They're accepted completely as they are, and that's so beautiful. And occasionally, if you're used to a more individualist culture, slightly overwhelming at first, because parenting isn't something you do on your own schedule now. It exists within a much larger system of relationships. But of course, again, I am quite clearly a tourist, someone who doesn't have to try to fit in full time. And I'm aware how different my experience would be if I was always there, because there's this niggling at the back of my mind. There's the low-level worry of always managing and double guessing what I'm saying, because I don't want to offend, and I don't want to be too offensively queer, because that queerness is the only reason that I'm here. I'm here because I'm married to another woman, a woman from this family, and she can say, I'm visiting my family when people ask why she's here, and she can chat about Chinese Malaysian life. But I can only say, I'm visiting my in-laws, and then I have to skirt questions about my non-existent husband.
So I'm in the hotel lobby with both the girls, just me, 2 babies, waiting for the golf cart thing that's going to take us back to the chalet where we're staying. And the lady behind the desk comes over, she's like, oh, they're so cute, they're so beautiful. I'm like, thank you, thank you. She says, are they yours? And I'm like, yes, because A, true, these are my babies, and B, if I say no, whose babies are they? Did I steal them? Are you going to have to call security? No, they're mine. Yes, these are my babies. And she goes, did you have a cesarean? They're born by cesarean, yes. And then I feel like, oh, I better keep this going. Okay. And she goes, oh, they look really Chinese. Your husband, is he Chinese? Oh, husband, don't have one. They're mixed. Because again, it's not a lie. They were born by cesarean. They are mixed. I'm just incapable of answering your questions. Why?
But why don't I want to ruffle feathers? What's the problem with doing so? Who would I be upsetting, really? I'm just a tourist. I'll be leaving soon, but not every other queer person will. So should I be louder and prouder for people who feel like they can't be? Or should I not make a scene in order to normalise queerness? In collectivist cultures, maintaining harmony within the group is often prioritised. That can mean avoiding conflict. Tick. Respecting elders. Tick. And sometimes placing family needs above individual expression. Tick. We've been in restaurants with one of the RTs where she has explained, in Chinese, to interested parties that we're a family with 2 mothers and no father. But I'm a guest of the family. Can I offer that information myself? Verbally, I mean. My very clearly different look, whilst also interacting with these children who look mixed, already adds a level of, who is she? I don't want to be seen as going against either the family or the general culture. But why? I definitely don't care about being seen as different in England. In a more individualistic society, self-expression, being openly, visibly yourself, is often seen as a core value. I do not give 2 hoots about people staring at me for my vintage style. It's not why I dress this way, but it certainly isn't a deterrent. If I feel joy when I look in the mirror, then I'm wearing it. Neither of these approaches is inherently better, they're just different ways of organising social life. But it does become particularly interesting when you're part of a queer family, because in individualist cultures, queerness is often framed as something very personal, an identity that you assert, something you claim publicly. But in collectivist contexts, identity is often negotiated in relation to the group. Less, who am I as an individual? And more, how do I exist within this network of relationships? Which doesn't make those relationships less real or meaningful, but the love, care and connection are just expressed in ways that don't always map neatly onto Western ideas of visibility or identity politics. I hate that phrase, identity politics. I'm literally just using it to make a point. You shouldn't be seen as political just for existing, even though many of us are. We've always taught Rupert that there are many definitions of family, that no two families look the same, and that each child has a different experience of growing up, even within the same family, even when they're twins. And when you see a child surrounded by people who care for them, hold them, include them in a wider web of relationships, it really just brings home that point. Family is about connection. Experiencing that kind of collective care, even briefly, can shift the way you think about what support looks like. Boy, would I love to live in a collectivist culture right now. And I have 3 small children under the age of 5. I'm not expecting family members to wave a progress pride flag to show their support, and I don't need that. The first time we were in Malaysia, Claude's family threw us this huge joint engagement party with her sister and her sister's fiancé, and they treated us exactly the same. They didn't need to say outright, "We accept you being gay." Just a smile, polite hug, and cooing over our children will do. Of course, these different ways of understanding family also shape how identity is expressed, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But also, let's cover some harsh facts about being queer in Malaysia. Let's make things even more complex. LGBTQ+ rights in Malaysia. Absolute trigger warning, my friends. Please skip ahead to this point if you cannot face some really harsh anti-LGBTQ+ news right now. Neither can I, but here I am. Although same-sex identities alone are not criminalised under the law in Malaysia, the act of sodomy is a crime in the country. Laws are enforced arbitrarily and sometimes politically.
Being queer in Malaysia is kind of like being in a state of limbo. The homophobia and transphobia is so normalized and ingrained in this country. I hope that in my lifetime, I'll see a Malaysian pride parade to know that we've made enough progress that we can celebrate our identities without fearing being on the wrong side of the law.
Murders of LGBTQ+ people have also occurred in the country, and there are no Malaysian laws protecting the LGBTQ+ community against discrimination and hate crimes. Muslim citizens may additionally be charged in an Islamic court, and foreigners may be deported. Social attitudes towards the LGBTQ+ community in the country are largely shaped by Islam, the official state religion of Malaysia. However, non-Muslim people are not subjected to Islamic law, and the Islamic courts have no jurisdiction over non-Muslims, which is enshrined in their federal constitution of Malaysia. As such, it is hard to ascertain the LGBTQ+ demographic in the country due to widespread fears of being ostracized and prosecuted and violent. Conversion therapy is still also practiced regularly in the country and is openly promoted by politicians and religious leaders. Culturally, in 2010, the Film Censorship Board of Malaysia announced it would only allow depiction of homosexual characters as long as the characters repent or go straight in the end. However, when in 2017 Malaysia tried to censor Beauty and the Beast over some gay moments, it eventually relented and let the movie be shown. The censorship board also had no objections to the screenings of Power Rangers, even with a lesbian character in the movie. I think we can see some differences, but this is the reality.
Police have foiled a secret gathering over 100 gay men. Police have detained 201 people in a raid on a 2-story gym and sauna in Chowkit, allegedly used by gay men for sexual activities.
Even rainbow-coloured watches were at one point seized by the government for being too gay.
These colourful watches won't be sold in Malaysia. Authorities there seized Swatch's Pride collection because same-sex relationships are illegal there.
In 2023, English pop rock band the 1975, yes, that one, Matty Healy, was forced by the organisers of Good Vibes Festival to prematurely end their performance after their lead vocalist, Matty Healy, criticised the country's widespread anti-LGBTQ+ laws on stage and kissed fellow bandmate Ross MacDonald. He's not gay, by the way. That was just making a point. Human rights and LGBTQ+ activist Peter Thatchell, writing for The Guardian, expressed that Healy was no white saviour for showing solidarity with the community, as queer rights are a universal human right, not a Western one.
He was absolutely right to speak out, and I know many Malaysian LGBT+ people who applaud him. You can criticise Matt Healy all you want, but none of these critics have ever done anything for LGBT+ people in Malaysia.
Some local LGBTQ plus activists and allies in the country have slammed Healy's actions by describing his onstage antics as performative and giving white savior complex.
I'm afraid that activists and people in my community will be imprisoned, and the government is angry that they've been criticized this way.
That same month, 8 people were arrested by the police in Kuala Lumpur for staging a demonstration supporting LGBTQ plus rights. I personally do have some issues with Matthew Healy being like, oh, I'm so brave, I'm taking a stand. But also, I'm a straight white man who's just gonna nope out of this country. Now I've created this drama. Goodbye. In 2023, the Global Trans Rights Index ranked Malaysia as the 2nd worst country in the world in terms of transgender rights, only after Guyana. And hello again to those of you who skipped ahead. Now, let's be clear. I am not trying to scare you away from Malaysia at all. It is an amazing country. It's very beautiful. The people we have met are wonderful, but we stick to the capital and tourist areas, as the aunties warned us to do. I could also show you stories about LGBTQ plus hate crimes in the UK, but we have hate crime laws here. I am merely telling you that the underlying fear I have is not unfounded, and that I have a very different experience of being in the country than the queer people who actually live there. Yes, we did clock a number of our Rainbow family members as we were walking around, and hello to those of you who came up to say you're subscribers and have been watching for a long time, especially the lovely gal from Somewhere Pyramid who said she'd been watching since Claude and I got married, which is 10 years this year. So why go to a country that doesn't want you to be gay there? Because people are more than one thing. My wife doesn't stop being Malaysian just because she's gay. This doesn't stop being my children's heritage just because they have 2 mums. They deserve a connection with that culture, even if we have to occasionally skirt around the edges and turn their faces away. You can be proud of your heritage, even if you don't agree with all of it. Queer identity in different cultural contexts. As we have already established, in the UK, queerness is often framed as an individual identity, something you assert publicly that's tied to visibility. But globally, that framework doesn't always apply, as in many cultures, identity is less about individual expression and more about maintaining harmony within family and community. So queerness doesn't disappear. We're queer and we're here. We won't just disappear. But it may be understood differently. It's more private and more contextual. This is where queer diaspora theory comes in, the idea that queer identity shifts across cultural and geographic contexts. What is queer diaspora theory? I'm so glad you asked. Founded in a collection of essays from the year 2000, queer diaspora theory analyses how sexuality, gender identity, and non-normative desires are reconfigured through migration, displacement, and transnational connection. The theory challenges heteronormative concepts of home and nation, arguing that queer subjects often experience exile even within their own countries. The original essays highlight how queer identity in particular is affected in ways that are as nuanced and varied as the cultural, social, and physical environments themselves. They cover everything from the 1950s lesbian pulp fiction, a favourite topic of mine, to the appropriation of religious ceremony by gay Filipino immigrants in New York City and the implicit connection between Jewishness and homosexuality in the work of Freud. As you can tell, the main theoretical approaches are queering the diaspora, analysing how non-heteronormative, impure or inauthentic subjectivities exist within traditional diasporic spaces, we're queer and we're here, and the diasporization of queer, which focuses on how queer people form communities of affinity, often independent of ethnicity. Queering the diaspora, diasporation of queer. Scholars like Gayatri Gopinath in Impossible Desires use this theory to analyse how cultural production, film, music, and literature creates alternative routes with a shared feeling of displacement or being unhome. Common in other diasporic groups, but specifically related to being excluded from hetero or cis-normative ideas of home and family. As a theoretical framework, it's essential for understanding how queer experiences are shaped by race, colonialism, and global capitalism. And when you're part of a queer family, moving between those contexts, you become very aware of those differences. I think one of the most important things to say is this. Experiences like this are rarely simple. I am an outsider. My wife is also an outsider to an extent. This is her family, yes, but she grew up in the UK. Our experience of being a queer family in Malaysia will always be different to the experience of queer people who actually live in the country. So when people ask the question, I can only answer from my perspective. Malaysian people in our experience are incredibly friendly, welcoming, and kind. And even though my skin prickles when the man at passport control asks how we're all related, I know that he's holding our British passports in his hand, And that's a huge amount of protection. I will never not be nervous though. I will never not want my son to just be that little bit quieter at the airport because we do not need attention right now. Is that a valid fear? Not in my personal experience. But being queer means I live with the weight of my own diaspora community. What is safety if we aren't all safe? Particularly now in the protection of 3 little people. There's joy in seeing your children connect with family, form relationships, become part of something larger than themselves. And there is also that complexity of awareness. The moments when you realize that your life and family is understood through a different lens. Moments when someone asks a question and an auntie gives you an "I'll handle this" look, then answers in a language you don't understand. Cultural relativism and care. I think it's really important to avoid a very common trap, which is looking at different cultures and immediately trying to rank them. More progressive, less progressive, better, worse. Because reality is more nuanced than that. Cultural relativism is the principle that an individual's beliefs, values, and practices should be understood based on that person's own culture, rather than judged against the criteria of another. It asserts that no culture is superior to another and that moral or ethical truths are relative to specific cultural contexts, not universal. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to abandon the moral absolutism contraction, the idea that certain actions are universally wrong, regardless of cultural approval. Now I have a lot to answer for. Or that we should dig into extreme relativism, the idea that we can't criticize harmful practices such as human rights violations or anti-LGBTQ+ behavior because doing so requires an external standard. Gay is always okay. It just means that we shouldn't get weird about someone eating a guinea pig just because in our country they're kept as pets. That's not a Malaysian thing, by the way. But also, accepting that all people are equal is pretty darn important. It isn't ethnocentrism, a term first used by sociologist William G. Summer to describe the tendency to view one's own culture as superior and to judge others by its standards, to believe in rights for queer and trans people. My own culture doesn't exactly get that right. No LGB without the T. Cultural relativism doesn't mean abandoning your values, but it does mean approaching difference with curiosity rather than assumption. They're giving me that blank look because they hate me, or maybe they're just giving you that blank look because they've never come across this thing before in their processing. And when family is involved, it becomes even more important. What this trip taught me. I think this experience made me think a lot about what family really means. I have a whole little series of videos I made about being a non-biological, non-gestational mother, so, you know, clearly blood and biology aren't the most important things to me. I think a family is the people who love and support you. Because family isn't just about shared identity. It's about care, connection, showing up for one another, even when you don't fully understand each other's worlds or words. And queer families in particular are very good at navigating that because we've always had to.
I don't know whether it's easier or harder having children who are mixed race, because then the fact that they don't look like me isn't ever an issue. And there's a lot that you can get away with not knowing as the white parent, I guess. People don't expect you to be able to pronounce things properly. People don't expect you to know all of the customs necessarily. So when they ask you about, oh, does your child da-da-da, does your husband's family do da-da-da, and I'm like, when people see me with Rupert and go, oh, it doesn't necessarily look that similar, but oh, it must be the Chinese husband, that's why. But yeah.
It's easier to fly under the radar as a queer family when your children are mixed. People see me with my children and they say, father's Chinese? And I just say, they're mixed, and maybe next time I'll try out saying, my wife is, and we'll see what happens. So what is it like being a queer family in Malaysia? It's joyful, it's complicated, it's full of love, and sometimes it requires a bit more thought. But ultimately, is Malaysia a country we will continue to return to, despite everything we know? Yes, because again, you don't have to agree with everything about a country to feel love for it. It just reminds me that family is not one fixed thing. It changes, adapts, and stretches across cultures, languages, and expectations. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't always look the same everywhere, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. What does love look like to you? Please share in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I post new videos every week, so stay tuned and I will see you in the next one. And don't forget to get 40% off your first year of Hey Polo by clicking the link in the description. Go to heypolo.com/Jessica and use code Jessica. Keep your family together and safe when you're out and about with Hey Polo. Bye bye.